In question one, we're given four situations where we specify whether we can consider these people as unemployed or not. First one, a person out of work and is actively searching for a job, searching for work. They are unemployed. They're able to obtain a job, but they haven't gotten to that stage yet, so they're unemployed. A person in prison. They can't find a job. They're in prison. They have to do, prison work and serve out their sentence, so they can't be counted as part of the unemployed. A person who wants to work but stopped searching 6 months ago. Though they aren't searching for work, if they actually they should be able to obtain a job, so they are part of the unemployed group. And a person who works part time but wants to work full time work, they're employed. Even though it's not full time, they have some sort of job, so they aren't counted as unemployed. In question two, we are asked to specify what adults who aren't part of the labor force. If we look at the graph, we see that adults who are students, homemakers, retirees are considered not to be of the labor force. These are the people who can't actually look for jobs. Students have to focus on their studies. Homemakers are taking care of the house, and retirees have retired from their jobs and they're not going to come back soon. They can't be contributing to the labor force at this moment. Question three: if we count discouraged workers as unemployed when calculating the unemployment rate, does the rate more than double, less than double, remain unchanged? We can say that the rate does change. However, it's super small when compared to the actual unemployed workers. So the graph doesn't change as much. So the rate is less than double. In fact, if we look at the graph, they're a bit quite similar actually. And for question four, we're given three situations. We need to decide whether it's frictional, an example of frictional, structural, or cyclical unemployment. Part A: the economy gets worse, so General Motors shuts down a factory for 4 months, laying off workers. This is cyclical unemployment. This is unemployment. This is correlated with the business cycle. If we get into a recession or a depression, people are forced to lay off workers in order for that company to survive. So as we see here, the economy got worse, so it couldn't be helped. B: General Motors laid off 5,000 workers and replaced them with robots. The workers start looking for jobs outside the auto industry. This is structural. This unemployment has to do with permanent changes to the economy. After time, certain industries will be obsolete, and they'll go down, and they won't be relevant anymore, like blacksmiths. So workers that are replaced with robots, it's just part of the time. So it is structural unemployment. Part C: about 10 workers per month at a General Motors plant quit their jobs because they want to live in another town. They start searching for work in a new town. This is frictional unemployment. Ends can't be met between the worker and the employer. They can have a disagreement of the pay or the location and such. And since they are unemployed because of personal reasons, we could call this frictional.
Question 5 asks us to talk about minimum wage, which is a price floor because employers can't pay less than that amount to their employees. This then creates a surplus labor market as more people are incentivized to work, but employers have less money to pay per worker, which will lead to layoffs, probably. Question 6 asks about the employee protection situation in France for young minorities, since the law permits companies to easily fire those under the age of 26 in the first 2 years of their job. If the company has financial trouble, these groups of people, who are seen as expendable to most companies, are often going to be the first to go, leading to higher overall unemployment numbers and longer unemployment for this group. Moving to question 7, we're looking at a recession and how it impacts unemployment. Typically, the unemployment numbers peak right after a recession because the impacts are somewhat delayed, but this may depend on the length of the recession as well. For question 8, we're just looking at this graph and picking out the decade with highest natural unemployment, which ends up being the decade from 1975 to 1985. And for question 9, we're looking at another graph here of male labor force participation correlated with implicit tax index, and the difference between the highest and lowest ends of the spectrum here are Belgium and Japan, which is about 40%, and just quite a striking difference.
Question 10 asks for labor market policies that would be likely to decrease the rate of structural unemployment. A prime example is job training, which is basically a program that improves the skills of the labor force so they're ready to be productive and offer more to the economy. Another option is job search assistance, which basically helps connect employers with employees more efficiently and bring them to lower risk employees faster. Third option is work tests, which are basically written or oral exams that allow employers to gauge the skills of job applicants, and it soothes their apprehension and the potential of risk of hiring them. Anyway, question 11. Part A. Workers are laid off and start looking for work. That increases the unemployment rate because people are going from employed to unemployed and remaining within the labor force. Part B. People without jobs who are looking for work find work. That's basically the reverse process, so that decreases the unemployment rate. Part C. People without jobs and looking for work give up and stop looking. This causes the unemployment rate to fall because they go from unemployed to discouraged workers. And in the general unemployment rate, discouraged workers are not included, only in the special employment rate. Part D. People without jobs and not looking for work become encouraged and decide to start looking for work. That increases the unemployment rate because people are going from discouraged workers to unemployed, so they're basically re-entering the labor force. Part E. People without jobs and not looking for work take a job immediately. This causes the unemployment rate to decrease because they are entering the labor force, but they're entering it with a job, so they're basically increasing the proportion of the labor force that's employed. Question 12. Let's see how many jobs have to be destroyed for one net job to be created. So let's say 5 million jobs are destroyed every month and about 5.25 million jobs are created. So the net job creation is just created minus destroyed, so 0.25 million or 250,000. And the total job destruction divided by net job creation is 20. So how many total jobs are destroyed for every net job created? 20. 20 jobs are destroyed for every net job created. Question 13. The government raises the minimum wage by $2 an hour. So where do we expect more jobs to be lost? Definitely fast food industry over city government, since fast food jobs frequently pay minimum wage and city government jobs not as often. So fast food workers are more affected by the change, and they'll probably get laid off a lot more frequently.
For question 14, we want to calculate the employment rate and the labor force participation rate. And basically, we're using the two formulas mentioned in the textbook. The first one is the unemployment rate, which is unemployment divided by the total amount of people in the workforce times 100, and the labor force participation rate is labor force divided by population. So for part A, B, and C, those are the results that we get. For question 15, we examine how as the requirement to get disability payments is lowered, more people are found to be unemployed, and that is because since more people qualify as disabled, they can get the payments, and so they don't have the need to go out and actively seek jobs anymore. For question 16, we're looking at teenagers' labor force participation rates for the last 5 years. And what is interesting is that since we get this graph, we see that there is this chopped pattern emerge. And so for part A, we want to examine why that pattern exists. We said that the peaks for teenage employment seems to emerge at around summer months, so June and July, since that is when most students are on summer break and have more time to work and stay in the labor force. The rates fall low when school starts, and we see this pattern repeat itself in a yearly fashion. For part B, we want to examine what percentage of teenagers are in the labor force in those peak summer months. We said that there is a 42% labor force participation, while the lower rates we see is an average of 33%, and so over the year, the change is roughly 10%. For question 17, we're again using the Fred Economic Database. And here we see how different definitions of unemployment can show us different levels of unemployment. However, they do show the same pattern. For part A, in 2010, the highest unemployment rate was the rate defined by U6, which includes all persons marginally attached to the labor force and total employment part-time, and that is very high as 17.2%, and that was in April. But for the lowest employment rate was defined by U1, which is just the percent of civilian labor force unemployed 15 weeks and higher, and so it was around 5.2 near the end of 2010, so around October. We did find the definition of U6 to be very particular since it includes people who are marginally attached and it includes part-time workers. For part B, we said although all the definitions U1 to U6 share, they move together and they share the same patterns, they have different levels. And so it's not necessarily to specify the rate of the definition used if we're just describing the change.